This presentation analyzes for environmental balance. Pick up a rifle from page 187 to 188. So watching this video and reviewing it in the PDF version that I put up are going to help you complete writing assignment 2. For writing assignment 2, you're just going to be answering a list of 10 questions about one of 2 essays, and I've given you the essay choices on the assignment. This presentation will cover some of the kinds of analysis you're going to be doing in those 10 questions when you get to them. If you haven't read the essay for environmental balance, pick up a rifle, you should do so before you finish this video. So first, like I said, read the essay and have a look at the questions that follow and see if you can formulate your answers. The questions that follow the essays in the book, though you're not required to answer them and turn them in, they'll help you to understand and increase your comprehension of the essays that you've read. We're going to do a detailed analysis of the argument presented in the essay, in the environmental balance Christoph essay. We're going to examine the essay in parts, and you can follow along with the analysis in your textbook on page 189 to 191. I'm just going to go over some of the key parts of the analysis of the essay that your textbook does. So the first thing that your textbook looks at is the essay title, because titles are important. Your textbook's authors point out that the essay title contains 2 terms that might not seem to go together: environmental balance and rifle. These are 2 terms that maybe don't seem compatible with each other. So this title is effective because it hints at the topic and subject of the essay, but it also hints at what the author's thesis is, which is the main point that she or he, in this case it's a he, is going to be making about his topic. It also, this particular title reveals something about the author's persona because it uses 2 terms that might seem incompatible. So that might hint to us something about the author. Maybe he's a little bit controversial, maybe he's a little bold, and we'll get to his persona a little bit more later. The opening paragraphs are analyzed on page 189. The opening lines of this particular essay quiz the readers to get them engaged in thinking about the topic. The author also offers some surprising information. So he asks you, whether you think bears or deer kill more people, and it turns out that it's the deer, which is some surprising information. So the little quizzing technique that he does and the surprising information that he gives might help draw people in and engage them in what he's about to read. Because we're going to talk later, he may not be convincing everyone of his argument, but since he's writing for a newspaper, maybe he's trying to entertain people a little bit, and this sort of engagement might be part of the entertainment. Christoph doesn't get to his thesis until the 6th paragraph, and this is analyzed on page 189 of your text. His thesis is, "Let's bring back hunting." Since the essay was originally published in a newspaper, it has really short paragraphs because that's how the average audience for newspapers reads. Okay, readers wouldn't take long to get to his thesis, even though we don't get it till a little bit later. The paragraphs are so short that they'd get to them pretty quickly. Had this essay been published in a book, though, it's likely that those first 4 paragraphs likely would have been combined. So we're just going to remember that the basic point that Christoph is arguing is, let's bring back hunting. And remember, it's not that hunting has gone away entirely, but this paper was written in New York City. They're urban, city dwellers probably aren't doing a lot of hunting, so he's writing to an audience of people that aren't likely to be hunters. Christoph's purpose is analyzed on page 189 of our book. The basic point, the thesis, remember, is let's bring back hunting. But there aren't many key terms to help us see what Christoph's purpose or reason for writing is. Writers have different reasons for writing. Sometimes they just want to inform you about something. Sometimes they're only seeking to entertain you. Sometimes they're seeking to evaluate a specific issue or analyze it. But sometimes they're seeking to persuade you. Okay, so some things that clue you in is that a writer who's seeking to persuade you might lay out some specific, like a premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, or my first premise. This writer doesn't do that. He also doesn't use a lot of transitional words like therefore or because or since that would signal and hint to us that it's persuasion. So how do we know it's persuasion? Well, one way is it's just the title, Let's Bring Back Hunting. He's asking to do something. And he's saying, let us bring back hunting, right? So he definitely wants us to be involved. Readers can tell that Christoph is seeking to persuade because he's got that clear argumentative thesis that we just talked about. It's unusual, so even though he states his thesis early on, he's probably cluing readers in to see that we're going to need some clear, specific evidence to convince readers. He does give evidence throughout the essay, so even if you're not convinced, or even if you don't, we can see that what he's trying to do is convince us to accept his thesis. Even if we don't accept it by the end, even if readers don't accept it by the end, it's clear that that's what he's trying to get us to do. Now we're going to have a look at Christoph's methods. Last week, when you all analyzed images, you talked about the different methods that the photographers and the advertisers used to persuade viewers. You talked about in the ads where the text drew attention, where some of the different colors pulled people in, where the focus was on different points, what they emphasized for different audiences, and you all did the same with photographs. So a writer will also have methods that she or he uses to persuade people and draw them in. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the methods that Christoph uses. Okay, these first two we're going to examine are things that he does because he's a newspaper writer, he's a popular columnist, that might not work for you or I if we were trying to write an academic paper like you're trying to do in this class. Okay, one thing is that he seems to mock people on the other side. And remember, he can get away with this because he's a popular writer with his own column and a loyal following in a newspaper. We couldn't get away with this if we were trying to persuade others in a respectful, accepting way. The second thing is that he writes a little bit informally, making the essay a little bit playful and also probably drawing people in. But remember, he's trying to draw in a newspaper audience and get his column to have even more people following it. This could backfire. In an academic setting, people might not want to see an issue as serious as hunting in the environment treated in a light, playful way. Okay. But one thing that he does do that is something you all are going to have to do carefully and things we're going to look at in academic papers, is he presents evidence. He presents some statistics, some evidence in the form of statistics, just like Takake did in the first essay that we read this semester. He presents some examples, same thing, similar to what Takake did in that essay we read earlier this semester. And he cites authorities, in this case the New Jersey Audubon, for example. Now we're going to talk about the writer's persona. Okay, this comes across in his tone and in the language he uses. Okay, so according to our book, this writer presents himself as a confident, no-nonsense fellow. Okay, but again, we want to remember that he's a popular columnist and he can get away with a lot more things than we can. People are probably reading for entertainment, not for moral direction, not necessarily because they're going to be persuaded by his point. Okay, this would likely not work for an unknown persona. So, even though this works here, it might not be that effective. And it may not have worked on some of you because you don't know who he is and you're not interested in his column. So you may have found yourself at times that the way he presented himself did not help persuade you. Okay. Finally, the closing paragraphs, okay, and this is where he offers his most conclusive evidence. Not that his best evidence or strongest, but his conclusive. We can see that he's getting to what his final conclusion is and what the points are if you reread those closing paragraphs. He uses the word so to let readers know he's coming to the conclusion of his essay, and he affirms, meaning his final affirmation, his final point is made that hunting is a natural thing. And the analysis is in more detail on page 191 of your textbook. So let's think about maybe what he doesn't do so well. In an argument, it's important for writers to consider their audience. Remember that sometimes people might not agree with their thesis or claims. There are people who started this essay and may have even left it disagreeing with hunting. Okay, he's writing for a New York City audience. Most of the members of his audience will not be hunters since they're city dwellers, and some will likely even be opposed to hunting. He might lose some of his audience members with the approach that he takes. He also doesn't spend much time addressing opposition to his argument, meaning people who don't agree with him. Some members might therefore remain unconvinced. But again, this was a short article. It's written for a newspaper, not an academic journal or even a college class, so it might be a little bit different. So what I wanted you to do, and this link down here that I'm mentioning, I've also posted this in Blackboard on the lesson, so you can go to look to it as well, and in the PDF version. It goes to a website for an organization that is opposed to hunting and trapping animals. Okay, because the organization is aware that it must not only be giving reasons not to trap and hunt, because that's this organization's goal, but to address audience members who think trapping and hunting is humane and necessary. People like Christoph and other hunters and other people that support hunting. Okay, this organization, though, addresses opposing arguments by dismantling what it considers are myths about hunting. So I'm pulling you to this website, not because I'm asking you to take a specific side on the issue of hunting, but to look at what people do when they're making an argument. So here, Christoph is arguing that that hunting is good for environmental balance, but he doesn't spend a lot of time dealing with people who would tell him otherwise. This website, on the other hand, says that trapping is not humane. It's opposed to hunting and trapping, but first it gives its reasons on one page, and the page that I'm directing you to here thinks about people who are still going to say, well, how do we control populations of animals if we don't hunt? And exposes what it considers some of the myths about hunting. That's why I'd like you to take a look at it to see how addressing the opposition can work well. Okay, so last few points. Keep in mind that Christoph's article was short and written for a general audience, not an academic one. An academic argument would include addressing of opposition. All strong arguments include addressing of opposition. Keep this in mind as you analyze essays this semester, and keep it in mind as you compose your own arguments, which you're going to start doing in a couple weeks and at the end of the semester. And that's it. So if you want to review this information, it's in the PDF. I've put the link to that opposition to hunting website that just shows you how someone goes through and addresses opposition.